attending and for helping to make the City Law Breakfast an important public forum. I want to thank each of you for attending the breakfast, and over 300 people actually signed up for the breakfast, which I'm delighted to announce. I want to especially thank those of you who made voluntary contributions when you signed up to attend the breakfast. Your name will be prominently listed in the email sent immediately after this breakfast with a link to the video, which then can be seen by those who actually didn't attend. I also want to thank our 3 generous and loyal founding sponsors of the City Law Breakfast Series. They are Consolidated Edison and Verizon, and the law firm of Greenberg Traurig. They have been with us for decades, and I am delighted that they stick with us and help support these breakfasts. We're enormously grateful for the voluntary contributions and for our founding sponsors. For those of you who attended before, you know that after Commissioner Tisch's prepared remarks, we will have a question and comment session. You may submit a question or a comment at any time during the breakfast. You don't have to wait till the end. We will collect the questions and comments as they come in. To submit a question or comment, please use the Q&A function of your Zoom screen. Please identify yourself, and we ask that you use your first and last name and your organization. Following the question and comments, Anthony Crowell, Dean of the Law School, will join us for a conversation. We are delighted to welcome Sanitation Commissioner Jessica Tisch to our City Law Breakfast Series. Jessica Tisch was born in New York. She earned an undergraduate degree as well as a law and business degree from Harvard. Her first job after getting her degrees was at the New York City Police Department. At the NYPD, she worked first in counterterrorism and moved up to be Deputy Commissioner for Information Technology. In that position, Jessica Tisch led the efforts to modernize the NYPD's communications system. Mayor de Blasio in 2019 recognized her work and appointed Jessica Tisch Commissioner of the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. As Commissioner, Tisch launched a modernization of the city's information systems and managed the city's response to COVID-19. Incoming Mayor Eric Adams kept Jessica Tisch in city government, appointing her to be Commissioner of Sanitation in April 2022. Commissioner Tisch has, in less than a year, perhaps unexpectedly, become one of the more prominent members of the Adams administration. Wallace Sayre and Herbert Kaufman, in their monumental 1965 study of the New York City government, commented that the role of the Sanitation Commissioner is generally not so prominent. Sayre and Kaufman wrote, "The functions of the Department of Sanitation are comparatively non-controversial, attract only occasional widespread public attention, and rarely provide the commissioner with opportunities for dramatic forms of leadership." This statement may once have been true, but it does not apply to Commissioner Tisch. We're honored to welcome Commissioner Tisch to the City Law Breakfast. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First, Ross, thank you for having me. And obviously also Anthony Crowell, thank you so much for the invitation. I was saying before we started to Ross that I've been working in city government for 15 years, and being invited to speak to this group really feels like a very big deal for me and the culmination of a lot of hard work. So it truly is an honor and a privilege to be addressing this group. As Ross mentioned, I am a lawyer by training, but not in practice. But I know after 15 years working throughout city government that the work really gets done in the weeds, in the details of the MOUs, in the details of the contracts, in the details of the laws and the regulations, in that environmental review. And I have been thrilled to work with so many of you in those weeds where we really get a lot of stuff done, and we have gotten a lot of stuff done. So I just want to thank everyone attending today, many of you who I've worked with over the past decade and a half, for your partnership. It's really been one of the things that I've enjoyed most about my career in city government. Today, I'm here to talk to you about our work in sanitation. So I've been on the job at Sanitation about 10 months now. And in that time, we have taken on a number of fascinating new projects that are obviously helping the city, in my opinion, come back stronger than ever before. But I think all of us here today, certainly most New Yorkers, know that the city got noticeably dirtier over the course of the pandemic. Some of that is because behaviors changed, travel patterns changed. But in my opinion, the biggest cause was that in March of 2020, the portion of the budget of the Department of Sanitation that goes towards street cleanliness, our bread and butter, was absolutely decimated. Our special cleaning teams were cut. The mechanical brooms, which keep our curb lines clean and is certainly the best street cleaning tool that we have in our arsenal, they were muzzled, they were handcuffed, they were restricted to what really amounted as desk duty. Curbside composting, which keeps the rat food out of the black bags, was eliminated entirely. Those are obviously tough budgetary calls in a very challenging time, but what they really did was immediately, and I mean almost overnight, prove just how essential the Department of Sanitation is. Our budget was cut, and the very next day, the city looked worse. When Mayor Adams came into office, he set about taking care of two main sanitation objectives. And I'm going to go through both of them with you today. The first is what I like to call restore and more. So he put back into place the programs that had been cut, the litter basket service so that the litter baskets aren't constantly overflowing, the cleaning of the highway on and off ramps, the street sweeping. That stuff was our bread and butter. And when that went away, every New Yorker knew and saw the difference. And Mayor Adams didn't just restore those services. He took each one of them to the highest level of service that this city has ever seen, really going above and beyond on that kind of core competency cleaning, which in my opinion is very important to the look, the feel, the quality of our neighborhoods, and really restoring dignity to the city. But the other piece of the work that we've been doing over the past 10 months is what I want to focus on today with this group. And that is the strategic new things. I think many people who have traveled, especially to Europe, have seen that over the past 15 years, many cities around the world have really innovated around sanitation services and cleanliness. And New York City hasn't really done that in a meaningful way. And the 5 or so initiatives that we're doing to innovate now, to catch up to what other cities have done and have been doing for about 15 years is what I want to focus on today. And in particular, through the lens of the legal underpinnings of those initiatives. So the first one that I'd like to address today is what I call our Targeted Neighborhood Task Force. So if you go back several decades, there was an interagency MOU that's been in place for a long time, which set up jurisdiction for cleaning certain types of locations around the city. And that MOU basically took the jurisdiction for cleaning a number of locations in every neighborhood in the city away from the Department of Sanitation. And what Mayor Adams has done over the past 6 months is restore the jurisdiction of the Department of Sanitation for cleaning these locations. Now, what am I talking about? When I say that they are locations in every community that every New Yorker sees almost every day, I mean things like underpasses, overpasses, medians, greenways. And these locations were often the filthiest locations in the city, and that is because they were never cleaned. So the mayor not only restored the jurisdiction of the Department of Sanitation to clean up those neighborhoods, those parts of those neighborhoods about 3 months ago, he also funded a team of 200 dedicated sanitation workers whose only job it is to clean those dirtiest locations in every neighborhood in the city. And over the past 3 months, we've done almost 3 passes at each of those 1,500 locations, and it makes a transformational difference in how those parts of every community look. So what I ask this group is, next time you're traveling on an overpass or an underpass or the conduit in Queens, take a look with fresh eyes. Usually you see mess, you don't see clean, but look for the clean, because those parts of the city, those 1,500 locations, look meaningfully different. Not only have they been cleaned, they are going to be cleaned regularly. And the key there to getting that initiative off the ground was the legal MOU that was the underpinning of the old paradigm. So that was changed and updated. The second initiative that I want to talk about today, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these initiatives when we're done, but just to give you a brief overview, is our work to change the set out times for trash in New York City. So for decades, the set out time for trash, the time that New Yorkers are allowed to put their trash out on the curb, has been 4 p.m. That is the earliest set out time of any major city in the world. And what we've had for decades is this paradigm where New Yorkers set their trash out at 4 p.m. and the sanitation department doesn't come and collect it in a meaningful way until 6 a.m. So that means trash sits out on our curbs for 14 hours a day, every single day. And it's not just a little bit of trash. Every day, New Yorkers, just from residences, leave 24 million pounds of trash and recycling out on the curbs. And that 24 million pounds of trash and recycling, we know 1/3 of it is food waste or organic material. And so not only do those 24 million pounds of trash sitting out on the curbs serve as an all-you-can-eat buffet for rats, it also looks gross. And so we wanted to shrink the amount of time that trash sits on the streets in New York City. So what we announced, and we've done a formal rule change to that effect, is starting April 1st, in New York City, no black bags can be left on the streets before 8 p.m. If people want to set out their trash earlier, they may do so. They can put it out at 6 p.m. in a container. Same paradigm for businesses. No black bags on the curb before 8 p.m. If businesses close before 8 p.m., they may continue to set their trash out an hour before closing. But if it's before 8 p.m., it has to be in a container with a lid. Now, it's not just enough to ask New Yorkers to set their trash out later. To shrink that 14 hours in a meaningful way, the Department of Sanitation needs to kick in and do its part. And so what we've been doing over the past 4 months is a record amount of collection of trash on our midnight shift rather than on the 6 a.m. shift. And in that way, the goal is to shrink the average amount of time that trash spends on the street from 14 hours a day to about 4 to 6 hours after April 1st. And I do think that over time, as New Yorkers get it, no, not everyone will get it on day one, people will see a meaningful difference in the quality and the cleanliness of our streets as a result. The next thing I want to talk about this morning is our work around containerization. And anyone who has traveled to Europe has seen that in many major cities in Europe and in many major cities also in South America and some in Asia, they don't set their trash out on the streets anymore. They've really done a lot of work to institute what I call shared containers, where residents, instead of putting their trash on the street, they put their trash in a shared container that is on the curb line. Now, we are under enormous pressure to get this done. The mayor wants to see real progress around containerization. I think New Yorkers want to see it too. We are committed to doing it and to getting it done. But in my opinion, to do containerization, you have one opportunity to do it. Because there's 24 million pounds of trash on the street every single day, getting it wrong is not an option. And we are doing the very complicated work right now of figuring out how to do that in a city as dense and with as much trash as New York City. So I mentioned that it's complicated. And one of the very frustrating things for me is people that talk about containerization, they say, oh, why can't they just put a dumpster on the curb line? Boy, do I wish it was as simple as that. But unfortunately, it's not. It's actually going to be one of the most complicated infrastructure projects that this city will take on over the next decade. And there's a few reasons for that. Among them, curb space in New York is a zero-sum game. It's a limited resource. So what does placing containers on our curb lines mean for parking? What does it mean for outdoor dining? What does it mean for city bike? What does it mean and how does it work with all these different programs and use cases for curbside space? And that's a really important thing, not just to study, but to get right and to know before you do it what you're getting into. Second question is, how big do those containers need to be? Certainly, the containers would have to be so large if we continued just collecting trash 2 or 3 times a week. In most major cities that have rolled out containerization, they don't collect trash 2 or 3 times a week. They collect it every day of the week, 7 times of the week. So what are the implications for our service levels? And just to be clear about that, that's to make it so that the amount of trash that's left out is small enough to fit in reasonably sized containers. Another issue that we face with containerization is that the trucks that safely hoist the containers don't exist in North America. No major city in North America has rolled out universal containerization or really even like dabbled in meaningful containerization. And so we are working now with the trucking manufacturers to design a truck that meets North American safety and regulatory standards that could hoist the containers that we would put out rather than the rear loaders that we have today where we throw the containers where we throw the black bags in the back of the truck. Those are just some of the issues with containerization. I can get into so much more about it in Q&A, but right now we are doing a neighborhood by neighborhood and frankly, a street by street analysis, trying to figure out how we would roll out containerization in New York City. The next topic I want to talk about is something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is composting. As many of you may have seen, a week ago, the mayor announced that we are ending the psychodrama with curbside composting in New York City. He is committed to rolling out universal curbside composting to every residence in the city over the next 20 months. In the fall, we did a pilot of a new model for curbside composting, and we did it in the entire borough of Queens. And the idea behind that pilot is, let's do a mass market program. If we design a program only for the truest of the true believers, the people who could give us lectures on methane gas and its impacts on the environment, we are not going to meaningfully move our diversion rate in New York City. In order to move the diversion rate in a meaningful way, we need the average New Yorker to participate. And to get the average New Yorker to participate, we need a curbside composting program that is mass market. And when I say mass market, I mean easy to use, not something to have to really think about. The trucks need to roll every week reliably on your recycling day to every residence. And in that way, we got a huge amount of organic material out of the waste stream in the entire borough of Queens during the fall. In 12 weeks, we diverted 13 million pounds of organic material in Queens from landfill. And some of the neighborhoods that really outperformed the others were ones you would never expect. Jamaica and St. Albans diverted more material than the 7 districts around the city that had had composting for decades. Many districts in Queens outperformed Park Slope. And in my opinion, this keep it simple, this mass market approach, this no drama approach is the way to proceed with curbside composting in New York City. And that is the program that we are going to be rolling out citywide over the next 20 months. And I'm really excited to do it. The final thing that I wanted to address today on the strategic initiatives we're working on is the work that we're doing around illegal dumping. As many of you know, I have an enforcement background. I come from the NYPD. And when I showed up at the Department of Sanitation, council members would take me on tours of their districts, and almost everyone would take me to every known illegal dumping location in their neighborhood. Illegal dumping is not something that affects every neighborhood, but it is something that for the neighborhoods that it affects quite meaningfully. And for too long, for decades, the department's approach to handling illegal dumping was, let's just go and clean it up. Too bad it happened, let's go clean it up. But we never meaningfully caught the people who were responsible for the illegal dumping, and so there were no consequences for doing it. And my background at the NYPD, one of the things I worked on there was building out this citywide network of cameras. And this looked to me like the perfect use case for cameras. And so we started putting up as a pilot cameras in locations known for illegal dumping. We had our sanitation police monitoring the cameras. And it's so easy to catch an illegal dumper on an illegal dumping camera. And so we started catching people and issuing them $4,000 summonses, impounding their vehicles, making them pay the costs for cleanup, not once a week, every single day. And so the strategy really started to work. And one of the things that we did was we put all of the videos of the illegal dumping on social media, and it really took off. And the message to people who come in to our communities and dump is there are now consequences for it. The paradigm in New York City has changed. And so I'm very pleased to tell everyone that over the next several months, we're moving out of pilot mode. We are not just doubling down on this strategy, we're quadrupling down on it. We're putting up 200 plus more cameras in known locations for illegal dumping in every borough. And New Yorkers will see and feel a difference. Those were the major strategic initiatives that I wanted to highlight today. But I just wanted to conclude my remarks by saying, when I joined city government, it certainly wasn't the most thoughtful decision of my career. It sort of happened by chance. But for me, looking back, it was certainly one of the greatest gifts of my life. I really feel like I've had a charmed career. And the reason I feel like I've had a charmed career is every place I've gone, I've had an opportunity to make a dent and to change, for example, in policing, the way policing is done in New York City at Do It. I mean, I showed up there and like 2 weeks later it was like, surprise, pandemic, everything has to go online. So to be able to meaningfully contribute to the city's response to what I hope to be one of the biggest crises in our lives. I hope we don't see anything else like that. And now at the Department of Sanitation, which is just like provides the essential service to be able to show up to work every day and think like, how am I going to be able to clean up, or how is this organization going to help clean up New York City today? That is like one of the greatest honors and joys of my life. So I want to thank Ross and Anthony for inviting me today. And I want to thank all of you, many of whom I've done so much of this work with. You've been with me in the trenches. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Well, thank you. That was a terrific talk, and and it really fits the motto of this administration, getting stuff done. That's really great. We have lots of questions, and I'll go through them. Some of them you've already answered, but I'll mention them anyway. Augustino Canjani asks, please describe your priorities. I think you've done that. Would you like to add anything else? I think
we've hit the big ones. I think that the department has to get back to its roots and really be focused on cleanliness. But cleanliness cannot be done at the expense of sustainability. And I know that the two really go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So we're really focused on cleanliness and sustainability. The thing that I didn't mention that I would also say is among my top priorities is the work that this department has to do to implement commercial waste zones. We're in the middle of a procurement now, and as this group will understand, this of all groups will understand, I don't want to talk too much about the commercial waste zones while we have a procurement that's underway.
Okay, good. Thank you. Here's from Eric Goldstein from NRDC, and he asks about recycling. What kind of things could be done to increase recycling?
Thank you for that question, Eric. And it's very on brand, and I'm very happy you asked it. In my opinion, as you heard me mention before, in New York City, to meaningfully move the diversion rate, we need to go mass market. We need to focus on things that will really move the needle. And in my opinion, there are a few things that will move the diversion rate that's pretty much been stalled at around 18% in New York City for quite some time. And that is, one, rolling out universal curbside composting, which we're doing over the next 20 months. I failed to mention that we're considering putting in place a mandate for composting of yard waste, which is something that New Yorkers naturally separate already and really can produce a huge amount of tonnage. The other big thing that I think is like a mass market program that will meaningfully move the diversion rate in New York City is implementing commercial waste zones. So as I mentioned, there are 24 million pounds of residential waste that are left on the curbs in New York City every single day. There's about as much commercial waste that's left on the curbs in New York City every day. And so really getting a handle on diversion from waste from businesses, I think can make a big dent in what we divert from landfill in New York City generally.
Good. Here's from Jason Miranda, who's a student at New York Law School. Ask about, speak to the disparity, which he indicates between higher income neighborhoods in Manhattan that remain clean and pristine and lower income neighborhoods in the outer boroughs that remain filthy and littered. I think you've spoken to that, but it's a question that does come up.
Yeah, I think there's several things going on here. And I want to be very clear that the department is very thoughtful about how we allocate our resources. And one thing I can tell you is under the Adams administration, the dirtier neighborhoods in New York City get more resources from the Department of Sanitation than the clean neighborhoods do. And so this is not a question of, is the department allocating enough resources to the dirtier parts of the city, we are. You see that in the targeted neighborhood task force. You see that in our precision cleaning teams. We're really focused on it. One thing that I've observed is the cleaner neighborhoods tend to be neighborhoods where there are paid staff at buildings who clean the sidewalks and 18 inches into the curb. And there are staff there who, among their responsibilities, is doing that. And so during the day, all day, they're cleaning in front of their property. When you have parts of the city that don't have 24/7 staff to clean in front of the buildings, the sidewalks get dirty. And that, to my mind, is one of the reasons that some parts of the city look cleaner than others. It's one reason. It's among the reasons. There are a bunch of reasons. And so they're having these targeted neighborhood task force teams, having these precision cleaning teams going to address locations specifically in those neighborhoods that have the most dirty conditions. That's what we're doing to address it.
Thank you. There's Cynthia Prisco asked about the areas that you're cleaning up, these the locations like underpasses and overpasses. How can somebody nominate a location? Who do they call? How do they get it on the list?
Well, you can give it to me, but any New Yorker can also call 311 and report a dirty condition, and then we look at all of those locations that are reported as dirty conditions, and we use that as one of the data sources that inform the creation of that list, which is now up to like 15 or 1600 locations.
Here's another question. What is done with containerized garbage? The questioner says, did you mention recycling with respect to containerized garbage?
Yeah, so when we roll out containerization in New York City, there will have to be 3 different types of containers. There'll have to be containers for waste. There'll have to be containers for metal, glass, and plastic. Maybe containers for paper and cardboard, although that can get very bulky. So we'll have to see about those. And then obviously, with our commitment to rolling out universal curbside composting, there will have to be containers for compostable material. And so the containerization strategy that we're coming up with accounts for all of that on every block in every neighborhood.
It's a big job. Here's one from Frederick Schneider. Would the city of New York consider using private sector to work on solutions for the curbside containers for trash pickup?
Well,
Okay.
certainly, much of what government does, we don't do alone. And so the containers will be made by a private company. I mean, we haven't issued an RFP yet, but in terms of, I think the question is about the collection from the containers. No, that is envisioned to be done by the Department of Sanitation, whose responsibility it is to manage the 24 million pounds of trash and recycling New Yorkers put on the curbs every day.
Thanks. Here's Robin and Bill Hubbard. Will the composting program apply to office buildings as well?
The composting program is for residential, and there are certain mandates for certain types of businesses around diverting organic material. Those rules tend to apply to restaurants and food service businesses. But the program that I was speaking about that will be rolled out citywide over the next 20 months is just for residential waste.
There's a question from Rosina Abramson. You know, I've noticed, and I guess you have too, that many of the questions have come from people who followed this for a very long time. And you've gotten to know, as I have. Here's from Rosina. She says, have you considered pneumatic vacuum collection for proposed new developments such as Sunnyside Yards? has already been done on Roosevelt Island for 70 years, and increasingly in major cities, she says, around the world. The systems, she says, now recycle, reduce truck traffic, and eliminate bags and bins on the street.
Absolutely. I've been following what's been going on in other cities. One of the challenges that we have in New York City is that what we got underground is very complicated. It's more complicated underground than it is above ground. So even things like as basic as like containers underground, some cities are putting containers underground. For us, in most parts of the city, besides like net new, total new developments, which are like few and far between, it's just not realistic or viable. I wish it was.
Here's Kendall Christensen. In planning for waste containerization, are you focused on just residential or also commercial private carters?
So the plan that we're rolling out is focused on residential, but because commercial waste represents half of the waste in New York City, or almost half of the waste in New York City, you can't just roll out a plan for residential, be done, and think your city is containerized. Because the way the commercial carting industry works, and there, today are hundreds of carters that operate all over the city, and in the new commercial waste zone paradigm, there will be 3 different carters in each of the 20 zones that will be established. You can't mix commercial waste because the carters need to know, are they collecting the waste from their business? So we are thinking about other containerization strategies or requirements we can put in place that may be different than the shared containers we're contemplating for residential use, but thinking through how containers will and would work for businesses is definitely something that is not only on the table, but part of the analysis that we're doing right now.
Here's 2 questions that just emphasize how complex your problems are and how various the questions that come in. So here they are. Lauren George says, has the sanitation department working with schools to increase organic diversion and reduce contamination? And then Catherine McKay Hughes says, thank you so much. What do you think? What are your thoughts about the financial district where the sidewalks are so narrow? So here you go.
Okay, so let me start with schools. This mayor announced a commitment at the very beginning of his administration to ensure that every single New York City public school is separating out compostable or organic material in their cafeterias by the end of next school year. And so this year we did several hundred, this school year we've done several hundred schools. We're going to do a few hundred more in the spring. And by the end of the next school year, every single New York City public school will be separating out its organic material. And we do special collections at the Department of Sanitation for schools where every day we do our waste and our organic collection at schools. The other question was a great one. It was about the financial district and how containerization would work there. That's what we're doing right now. The analysis is so complicated. Looking at the number of parking spots on the street, like, for example, like Cedar Street, looking at the amount of waste that's put out, looking at, like, obviously today with 2 or 3 times a week collection, you could never have enough containers on Cedar Street, even if you obliterated 100% of the parking, to be able to containerize Cedar Street. And so we're looking at what are the implications if we dramatically increase our collection frequency as an example, like, can we make it work? And this is a street by street analysis that we're doing right now. And as part of that street by street analysis, it's become clear that there are certain highly problematic locations in the city, or locations that are much more difficult than others. And certainly the financial district has a number of very complicated streets for containerization.
Here's a question or a comment from Bart Schwartz, who is the NYCHA federal monitor. And he says, not a question, but a thank you for the fine working relationships we have with the Department of Sanitation. As to illegal dumping, we have been focusing on this, and we'll follow up with you. So, Bart.
Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you, Bart. Kathy, Ken, how will department handle curbside composting for large multi-family buildings? You've talked about this, but I guess maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've addressed this question, and thank you, Kathy, for asking it. So one of the things that we have tried as part of the pilot that we did in Queens this fall was automatically delivering a brown bin to every residential building in Queens that had 10 or more units. And again, there, the strategy is, let's make this as easy as possible for residents, for buildings, for building management to participate. Let's take away all of the hurdles that have existed in the past, where you needed to express interest and then opt in and then sign up and then order a specific type of bin. Like, we're getting rid of all of that. No need to do any of that. Like, you want to use our bin, we'll send you a bin. You don't want to use our bin, you have your own bin, God bless you, use your own bin. But for any building with 10 or more residences, to sort of like push the building management teams to participate, we automatically sent them at the beginning of the program a large brown bin that they could use for their buildings and their building residents. Now, did we see 100% compliance? Did we see 100% of large buildings participate? Absolutely not. But I believe that because, like, just having done that, sending them the bins, we got a lot more participation than we saw in previous attempts at curbside composting, where we didn't automatically send the bin.
Here's a question from Patria Frias Colon about rats. Program other than that you've already spoken of, does sanitation have a program to help homeowners address this, special garbage cans, et cetera?
I think that among the things I talked about, there are a few that really get at the rat problem. That is, one, limiting the amount of time that trash spends on the streets of the city. That's our change in the set out times. And then the Department of Sanitation collecting it earlier, which goes into effect on April 1st. What we like to say is, like, we want to limit the hours of the all night, all you can eat rat buffet. And then the curbside composting, I mean, getting that food waste out of the black bags is the single best rat mitigation strategy out there. And so by requiring the organic material to go into a bin rather than be placed on the curb, that is the best thing that New York City can do to, in my opinion, at least on the trash side, on the food source side, to shut down the all night, all you can eat rat buffet.
Here's a question from Kenneth Brown that covers a number of topics. Graffiti removal. You mentioned trash baskets at intersections, also recurring demand for please curb your dog signs.
Okay, I'm just writing them all down.
Okay, graffiti, trash baskets on the intersection, and curb your dog signs.
Okay, so let me talk about litter baskets first, because that's something that I don't think I've addressed yet. To me, with like coming into the Department of Sanitation with fresh eyes, it is absolutely absurd that the normal litter basket in New York City that has been around for decades is mesh, where you can see all the trash that's inside and rats can very easily access it. It's like one of those things that's just been and hasn't changed, and it's changing. So we have designed a new opaque rat-proof litter basket. Not only have we designed it, but we, as of a week ago or a few days ago, have a registered contract to buy these things from a company that's going to manufacture it. And you should see the new litter basket of the future that is opaque and rat-proof start to hit New York City intersections the end of the spring. And it's something that I'm really excited about rolling out citywide. Obviously, with 23,000 litter baskets, it'll take some time to replace all of them, but it's something that we're committed to doing. The other thing on litter baskets that I wanted to mention is like we're taking a good hard look at litter basket equity. Obviously, litter baskets on corners have to be in the places where there's the most foot traffic. But if you look like borough by borough, like Manhattan has so many more litter baskets than almost every other borough, that it's just something that like needs a real look and it needs real analysis. And it's something that we have underway at the Department of Sanitation. More to come soon on that. Curbing your dogs. As I said, I have an enforcement background, and I get the dog poop question a lot. Turns out it is very difficult to catch someone in the act of not cleaning up after their dog. We have enforcement agents out in locations that are reported on 311 where this is very problematic. And I don't feel like we yet have the enforcement strategy that is working. I'm happy to put up more signs. I don't think signs will do the trick here. It's definitely an area where I'm looking for improvement. And I just have to be honest that I haven't found the right strategy yet, but I don't really give up too easy. And then on graffiti, what I would say is today, graffiti removal is actually not the jurisdiction of the Department of Sanitation, but it's something that we are having conversations with our other interagency partners about, because in my opinion, it is part of the cleanliness of the city, and addressing graffiti problems would fit very nicely into some of the work that we're already undertaking at the Department of Sanitation.
I'm getting breathless. The number of issues are just enormous. Here's another one for you. This is again from Kendall Christensen. He says, a key difference with organics and other types of solid waste is it's mostly water. Food waste in particular, 70-90% water. Have you been working with DEP to benefit from its infrastructure to process that material as a liquid resource?
Well, yes, we have been working actually very closely with DEP. And one of the things I haven't mentioned on this call yet is what we're doing with the organic material that we've collected from Queens, that we're collecting from so many of the New York City public schools, that we're collecting in our smart bins that we've now put all over the place. And we're really doing two main things with it. We either send it out to be composted, or we send it to anaerobic digesters. And we work very closely with the Department of Environmental Protection, which runs, the city's wastewater treatment plants. And we send a bunch of the organic material to one of their wastewater treatment plants where they convert it into renewable energy.
Here's a question from one of your predecessors, Stephen Poland. Steve, thank you. Can you speak to the projected actual costs of composting citywide as compared to commingling the waste stream with regular trash? Composting is thought of as a pure good without talking about its costs. This is from Steve Poland, who probably wrestled with this very same problem a number of years ago.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, thank you for that question. I think one of the reasons that the mayor wanted had two criteria for curbside composting. It had to be effective, meaning it had to be something that New Yorkers actually use, that they participated in, and it had to be cost effective, which means that it had to be something that we could, from a cost perspective, scale citywide at reasonable cost. And the program that we rolled out in Queens is not only more effective than previous curbside composting programs, meaning the districts are outperforming the legacy opt-in districts that exist, that there are 7 districts citywide that are still use the old model. So not only did Queens outperform those districts, but we're doing it at 1/3 the cost. And the way we're doing it at 1/3 the cost, there's a number of things. There are workforce efficiencies that we found, but there are also fleet efficiencies that we found. In some neighborhoods, the refuse tonnage allows us to use a dual bin truck rather than a single rear loader where you'd have to send a second truck to collect the organics. So we can put the refuse in one side and the compost in the other side of the truck. And so by doing it that way in parts of the city that can accommodate it, we have significantly reduced the cost of curbside composting to allow this model to be affordable enough, reasonable enough to expand citywide.
Thank you. This will be the last question. I want to thank everybody for the excellent questions and so many of them, and thank you for taking on so many of them. Here's the last one from Ellen Cooper. What is the plan for electrifying the sanitation truck fleet?
Oy. So I believe I am all into electrification of our fleet. And I will say in our light and middleweight duty fleet, we're making some really nice progress. And I don't see big challenges there. I see profound challenges, however, in our heavy duty fleet. And in particular, with our rear loaders, our big sanitation collection trucks. And the reason why is we tested an electric sanitation truck, an electric rear loader in the winter. And I said this at the city council hearing, it basically conked out after 4 hours of plowing the snow.
I've lost it.
Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
We've lost
Yes,
our
we
feed.
can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. It conked out after 4 hours of plowing the snow. And because we use our heavy duty fleet to both collect trash and plow the snow, we can't meaningfully invest in more electric rear loaders until the industry gets to the place where those trucks can perform well for the plowing in addition to the collection. One other bright spot I should mention, I shouldn't be so negative, is that they work great for our street sweepers. And so we are really making some good investments there in electrifying our street sweeping fleet.
Terrific. I hope they're quieter than the current versions. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dean Anthony Crowell. This has been a really stimulating session, and thank you again for the wonderful questions and answers. Anthony Crowell, come on in.
Thanks, Ross. And Commissioner, it was a terrific talk. Really appreciated it. I have been someone who has long watched your career from afar, having been in municipal service and now the dean here for 25 years. Everyone knows who you are because you're one of, I would describe you as one of those Marvel superheroes out defending our city with great expertise and passion. I think there's a question that certainly has been addressed a bit in the press, but I remember a conversation you and I had as Mayor Adams was transitioning about your interest in this position. And I'd love for our audience to hear a little bit about why you wanted to be sanitation commissioner and how that has how that interest has been something that's allowed you to thrive, which is clearly something you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I have made the thing that I have enjoyed most about my career is focusing on how I can make a dent for New Yorkers, how you can make life in this city for New Yorkers a little bit better. And I've really enjoyed the work I did in policing with that goal in mind. Certainly, like during the pandemic, I do it. But like, if you think about sanitation, it is the essential service. I mean, God bless the fire department. I love the New York City Fire Department, but your average New Yorker, if they're lucky, could go their whole lives without having to interact with or rely on for service the fire department. At the Department of Sanitation, if we don't do our jobs for one day, everyone in New York City notices. And if you don't do your jobs for like 2 or 3 days, that's called a public health crisis. And I am super into thinking about how New York City can deliver our essential services better, more efficiently, and frankly, with a customer service mentality and approach. And the opportunities to do that at the Department of Sanitation were incredible. And it's just been like a great joy, a great privilege to lead this agency and get to come to work every day thinking, how are we going to clean up New York City today? How are we going to do it better? How are we going to make our neighborhoods more sustainable, more dignified? And that's why I wanted this job. That's what I got. I'm living the dream. You guys are just watching.
You clearly understand the common denominator that is the sanitation department in all our lives, and sort of the humanity that is tied to an otherwise messy job but essential job that we all benefit from. You bring this experience from the police department, from Do It to sanitation. How is technology and your command of technology? And I want to just commend you on your command of all the issues. Obviously, you need to have that as commissioner, but having worked your way up the ranks in municipal service gives you a command in a way that I think many commissioners who come into city service don't have. But tell us how your experience in technology is shaping sort of the future for sanitation.
In my opinion, over let's say the next decade, every leader of every major organization is going to have a real serious understanding of how the basics of tech and how it can be used to transform organizations. It's not going to be a nice to have, it's going to be a must have. I was fortunate enough to get a lot of experience with that running tech at the NYPD, where we saw really in over 5 or 6 years, how technology just absolutely transformed the basic operations of the police department. I mean, basic things like how a cop responds to a 911 call for service instead of just waiting for it to be dispatched over a very busy radio frequency. The department changed overnight when we put an app on their phones, and they could, see the job that they had to respond to on their app with the history of what's happened at that location. It was incredible to watch that transformation. One of the things that was a wonderful surprise to me when I showed up at the Department of Sanitation is it's very clear that when we were doing all that work at the NYPD, modernizing and, putting new tech programs in place, they were doing the same thing at the Department of Sanitation. Gone are the days of giving a sanitation worker a route to plow on the back of a paper napkin. There's GPS in all of the trucks. We've put GPS in all of the street sweepers, and the work that has been done at the department over the past 10 years to make it a real data-focused agency that leverages technology has really been extraordinary. And I think it's one of the things that people don't know enough about the Department of Sanitation.
Yeah, I love that answer. we were talking a little bit earlier. I believe you are the first lawyer to have served as sanitation commissioner. And some might say, what's a lawyer doing in this role? Of course, as a law school dean, I can give so many different answers as to why a lawyer brings an exceptional skill set. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what your legal training, certainly you went to business school as well, but what that legal training has meant to the way you look at such a complex job that is absolutely affected not only by so many laws, but the aspirations of what law has for our future of our environment, climate, things like that. So much touches down or is affected by sanitation.
Yeah, I think throughout my career, I mean, I've never really practiced law, but throughout my career, I haven't had like legal jobs, but my legal training has been, I think, absolutely fundamental to any success that I've had or that our programs have had. Because as I was mentioning earlier, not all of the battle, but a good part of the battle, 50% of the battle is getting the details of that MOU straight. In tech, that contract, writing that contract, the most important thing you can do. How the rule is written, how the regulation is shaped, what the environmental review analyzes. Those things are absolutely fundamental to any and everything that you really can do that's meaningful in city government. If you don't get that stuff right, you don't have a program. You can't make a difference. And that's why, for me, being invited to this breakfast with this audience, like the people who, many of whom, like I've worked with either on the advocacy side or internally on the city side to like really get things done. I think like anyone who runs an organization has to have, in addition to like generally understanding tech, like a real good appreciation for all of like the legal underpinnings of virtually everything.
Yep. Yeah, it's an incredible skill set and understanding to have. One last question. You are the third woman, I believe, to be a sanitation commissioner. 62% of our students are women. Many of them are, in my opinion, certainly destined to do bold and exciting roles, and we want to support them. What advice do you have for them? And you have, in your career, been certainly at agencies that historically have been heavily dominated by men and very powerful men. And I'd love to hear some of the thoughts that you have to give to those 62% of our students.
I have a few, but I think the biggest one is I want all of those students to know I have never gotten a job that I haven't asked for. It is very rare. It certainly never happened to me that someone comes to you and says, oh, please accept this promotion. Please take this new job. I mean, maybe it'll happen one day, but it hasn't happened yet. And one of the things that we know through like data and research is that women don't ask as much. And if there's like one piece of advice that I can give to women starting out their career, it's don't be shy to ask. Now, don't ask for crazy things that are outlandish. But in my opinion, like I deserved every job I got. I also had to ask for every job I got. I had to fight for it. I had to interview for it. I had to explain my talent and my ability. But I didn't get to do any of that until I asked. And that's what I would say to women starting out now, is to keep in mind as they go throughout their career.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an essential. You won't be in a position unless you make it clear that you want it. And certainly you have outperformed every time. So we have loved having you. We've appreciated watching your great work. And you're just a few blocks from here, but we look forward to the years that come. So thank you for your time today, and we are here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for both of you. I do want to make one comment because Steve Poland is watching. He's a lawyer also.
Oh.
So I don't want to be yelled at by Steve, which he will do. So, but I wanted to thank you. This has really been an extraordinary breakfast. And it's exactly the kind of breakfast I always hope to have, with somebody who was doing a job and could explain what they're doing and the challenges they have and make us feel the kind of work and talents that you need in order to get anything done in the city. Thank you for sharing so much this morning. You were terrific. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Commissioner Tisch. We'll see you in 2 weeks with Deputy Mayor Mira